I'm here with the boys from Caligula's Horse. They're touring across North America right now. They're in Toronto today. A cold Toronto, but it's going to be a warm venue because I expect everybody to be enjoying not only the old repertoire, but the new record that you guys just released last month as well. But first of all, before we talk about that, welcome to Toronto. How are you guys doing?
Hey, thank you, man. You mentioned it's cold. I know for a fact that for you guys it's not cold, but of course, naturally, as Australians, we are weak as piss. But other than that, feeling great.
How you plan on adjusting for the rest of this tour? Like it's a tour that's going to take you across very different states, Canada and U.S. How are you mentally preparing for this tour, for this road trip, if you will, extended road trip?
My technique for mental preparation is just to not. What about you, Sam?
Well, I think the worst parts of the preparation are kind of on their way out now because we were not ready for the cold. That was definitely something that took us by surprise. But as the tour goes on, that's going to become less and less of a problem. So maybe most of the hard work is done.
Cursed immediately.
That was like an evil villain laugh. That's what I got there. You guys played at Prog Power last year in September. You didn't have the new record yet, but now you have the new record. You're doing this North American tour. How does that change the set list for you? How you approach the set list, considering that fans want to hear some new material?
Man, it's tricky, hey. It's one of those ones where we kind of shot ourselves in the foot by writing a bunch of long songs on one album and then try to tour on it. But a set list is always kind of built off what we can fit in and where we are and who we're playing to. So for this time, for example, we're in North America for the very first time doing a headline show. So we want to make sure that everybody gets kind of like a breadth of the back catalogue as much as the new stuff. I mean, there's still definitely a Charcoal Grace focus, but yeah, people are going to get a nice taste of everything we've done so far.
When you guys approach a record like Charcoal Grace, do you think about the live aspect of the band? Do you consider that at all, that some of these songs are going to have to be included in a set list? They're going to have to fit a more independent mode, that it doesn't have that whole album vibe behind it?
To a degree, yeah. Charcoal Grace is actually kind of different in a certain regard, though. When you were asking that question, I immediately thought about Rise Radiant, which is obviously an album that we wrote deliberately on the back of a bunch of touring with the idea that it was going to be like a live album foremost. All those songs would translate that way. Charcoal Grace obviously came after 3 years of us sitting in our homes, just trying to sort of survive as a band, really. So it didn't have that same vision for the stage that maybe some of our previous stuff did. And on top of that, of course, we have the orchestra, we have all these other elements in that record that kind of confound it somewhat. So the short version is Charcoal Grace, not really. It's actually an album that we've discovered live, as opposed to an album like Rise Radiant, where we kind of deliberately wrote it for that context.
Creating that record, writing that record, considering the surroundings of that record were different from previous albums, how much of that impacted the creative process? Did you take different roadmaps to where you wanted to go?
Hugely, to a degree unlike any record previous. I mean, Charcoal Grace came out of probably the lowest point in the band's career. And I mean, a lot of other bands can probably echo this sentiment throughout the pandemic. We finished and released Rise Radiant, like an album that at that time was really the apex of our career. We kind of saw everything we wanted slowly come into being in front of us, from the US tour, the European tour that we had planned after that, and then all of that just immediately end as COVID hit. So we, in the beginnings of writing, well, I mean, I can precede that by saying it actually took a long time to even begin writing. Yep. We were definitely very resistant to the idea of sort of starting the new record, as it were, and the implication there that it means leaving the Rise Radiant material behind, that being a vestige of the past and us moving beyond it. But once we actually got into it, it sort of felt like our own cathartic way of like leaving the pandemic years behind, and that's the way that we started conceptualizing when we started writing. So maybe that was the biggest difference, was really just the beginnings, the underpinnings of the record.
So how do you explain that? You write, perhaps in my humble opinion, for whatever it's worth, the band's best record coming out of the darkest time in human history, at least not in human history, but our history since we've been around. Yeah, since we've been around.
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you very much. That means a lot, because, I mean, if there's one thing that's very true about this record, it's that we really didn't know what the reception was going to be like. No. This, of all records that we've ever written, was really the most the most personally kind of biased and framed record we've ever done. This was something we wrote for us, to get past these years, to move on as a band and to kind of find ourselves again. And for what it's worth, it did that to a degree that I don't think we would even. I don't think we knew how well it would kind of mend the holes in the band, the issues of those years. So no, it's wonderful that you say that, but it really was an album that I don't think we had much of a sense of how it would be received or understood.
Not at all. I remember actually being pretty nervous, to be honest. Like when it came to the release, like I love the thing, you know, like I'm super.
I
proud
hope
of it.
so.
Yeah. No, I only release music that I dislike. It's part of my artistic message here, is that nothing can be good. No, it's like, you know, in the lead up to this release, I remember thinking to myself, like, it is so starkly different from what we've just done. It's a lot darker and a lot more personal, that kind of stuff. And that really kind of worried me as to whether it was just going to get completely canned or whatever. But the response was insane. And I think it's sort of coincidental in a way, because when we released Rise Radiant, while it was right in the middle of the pandemic, it was an album about that overcoming, about energy, about inner strength, about, you know, loving yourself and all of that kind of stuff at a time when people coincidentally really needed that. And Charcoal Grace is coming at a time where we're coming out of this period of our, you know, history, we're coming out of all of this stuff, we've gone through it all, and now we're able to sort of look back and sort of maybe let go of it a little bit. So both of those albums have kind of landed exactly where they needed to be, which is really interesting, I thought.
You touched on one word that I thought was really interesting, which was personal. When I was listening to the record, I've always felt that the music and the vocals, when it comes to the band, there's always this emotional connection between the two, which becomes a huge part of the band's DNA. On this record, it came through even better. The connection between the emotional delivery of the lyrics, of the ebbs and flows that you create vocally with the ebbs and flows that you create musically, were a lot better connected. It was hard to distinguish the two. Did you feel that in the process of making the album? Was there a conscious effort to do that, or is that just the natural output?
Well, we always have a desire to be emotionally honest and to be emotional in our music and to hope it connects with other people as well. But I think because of how strong the emotions we felt, of like the ego death that we'd all been through and the like absolutely transformative horror of the last few years, and like so all of those feelings were deeply intense. And I remember there was some, I think there was one or two in the Charcoal Grace suite, the big long suite, and then one spot in Mute as well, where I couldn't get the line out because I was crying. So it's like it was that level of emotion was going into this performance and this thing, because I just wanted to capture it, and I hit it a little too hard on a couple of those, and sort of we had to walk away and take a break and then come back, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's worth saying that, like, our creative process, the idea of it being this kind of integrated thing, like we write in a way that is actually quite different than a lot of metal bands. You hear in metal, I'm going to say the most common process tends to be a kind of like music first, lyrics situated as
Second,
music.
yeah.
Our approach tends to be to kind of create. I'll usually create a small musical backdrop, maybe some harmony, some rhythm, a riff, a motif, and Jim and I will start working on it from the very beginning. So we don't tend to write, layer by layer. We tend to write section by section. And there's always this bigger sense of how one thing speaks to the next or relates to the next. It's sort of, I guess it's our little kind of secret in terms of getting the two elements, like the lyric and the music, to really have a holistic connection. So that's how we do it, and we hope that it adds something to it.
At what part of the process do you start thinking about the track list in terms of how these songs need to fit in order? I know this album doesn't have that overall arching concept, but you still need to create some sort of a path, some sort of a journey. At least that's always been my experience listening to your music. So I didn't think you were going to go completely rogue on this new record. So how do you balance that, the individuality of the songs, then with the overall collective?
Yeah, it can sometimes be a challenge. I mean, we've done, like, thinking back to Tide Thief and River's End, we made a record there where it needed to have some chronology to it. That was a challenge of its own. But the biggest challenge that I think we had with Charcoal Grace was actually the Charcoal Grace suite itself, which, being a side-length song, like a kind of the history of like 20-minute sort of long songs in progressive rock and progressive metal, it was going to be something like that. But I realized as we were nearing like the 19-20-minute mark, somewhere around Give Me Hell, that we were going to actually run into an existential problem with fitting it onto a vinyl slide. Because, it was already it was already that length. I had all these ends I needed to tie up in terms of the motifs. So that was really the only time that it became kind of obvious that we had to really think and curb the music around the way it would be sequenced on an album. In terms of the actual sequencing, though, I think we knew pretty early that we wanted to have the longest song in the middle as this kind of nexus of the rest of the record. And we knew once we had Breathe and Mute somewhat in place and knew that they were going to be kind of referring to one another, the rest of it actually was quite simple to sequence because we knew it would just be ebbs and flows. How do we get away from these really intense moments by giving some moment to rest, you know?
One last question for you guys. I always really feel completely magnetized by the artwork of the records. When I look at the artwork of the album, and after listening to the album, I could see where that artwork is coming from because it ties into the overall feel that the record gives. At what point in the process do you think about the artwork? Does the album almost auto-generate the artwork for you guys?
Well, it's always at the end of the process because one of the things that we do with working with these artists that we get to create, these incredibly talented people that we get to create the art for the album, is we provide them with all the demos and the lyrics, and if it's a concept album, the concept, and our kind of vague notions of what it's all about, and let them go away and absorb what they can from it and then create something that we couldn't possibly have imagined. So when it comes to guidance for an artist, I don't even think visually, man. Like it's like I'm blind in my head. I don't know, but like so when I'm not going to go to him and go like it'd be really cool to have like a person and their face to be kind of like. It's not like so. We looked at Chris Panettiere, for example, who did the artwork for Charcoal Grace. Is a really versatile artist, and a lot of the merch that we have is this sort of it stencil line kind of stuff.
Line and watercolor, yeah.
Yeah, and he's amazing at that, but we dug back into his back catalogue of stuff, and he has done these incredible canvas paintings that are really stylized. And one of the things that I noticed is that the theme that I took from it, just by looking at it, was like, it's like humanity with pieces missing. And so after chatting with him about that and providing him with all of that sort of stuff, he came up with what is now the album cover, and it absolutely blew our heads off. And that actually is a canvas painting, by the way. That exists.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. It just makes the whole experience a lot stronger once you understand the background and how things got to where they are. But the artwork on every single record, you guys always really nail it in terms of picking and. Normally the people say that you can't judge a book by its cover, but when I look at a Caligula's Horse album, you can not judge the album by its cover, but kind of get an idea of what you're getting yourself into.
Well, we sort of have this policy as well where, like a lot of bands really like the shared aesthetic between their catalogue. You know, the idea, like imagine a Cradle of Filth album cover drastically changing from the last or something. We like the idea that every album has this aesthetic that matches the music and is, as Jim says, inspired directly by the music. So they're all distinctive. And if they weren't, it would probably be a little bit disingenuous. It wouldn't feel like it's carrying that same message. So yeah, it's actually very deliberate that each album has its own. It's like a little microcosm of its own, you know?
Perfect, guys. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I wish you guys nothing but the best in this North American headlining tour. Maybe perhaps the only thing I can wish you guys is warmer weather ahead.
Yes,
Please.
So I'll wish you guys warmer weather ahead and all the best. And I hope to see you guys again soon. I feel like I'm getting a treat. I saw you guys in September, seeing you guys again now. So come back again, please.
I don't think you could stop us.
Turn it up. Turn the heat up. We'll be there.
Come back in the summer. Our summer, not your summer.
Sounds good.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.